If you're an author or plan to be one, get excited because this podcast is for you. Book Marketing Mentors is the only podcast dedicated to helping you successfully market and sell your book. If you're ready for empowering conversations with successful marketing mavens, then grab a coffee or tea and listen in to your host, international best-selling author Susan Friedman.
Welcome to Book Marketing Mentors, the weekly podcast where you learn proven strategies, tools, ideas, and tips from the masters. Every week, I introduce you to a marketing master who will share their expertise to help you market and sell more books. Today, my special guest is known as the Marketing Mentor. Marketing and writing with heart, not hype. Debra Jason is a speaker, author, copywriter, and marketing mentor. She speaks about the value of building relationships and the art of engaging to attract clients, generate leads, and network. Debra started her copywriting business from scratch with one client and no marketing credentials. After 30 years of consistent and persistent effort, she's proud to say that she's still in business. Author of the award-winning book, Millionaire Marketing on a Shoestring Budget, Debra shares cost-effective marketing strategies to help gain increased exposure, create a steady stream of happy clients, and build your business without breaking the bank. A National Speaker Association colleague, Debra, I am so thrilled to welcome you back to the show and thank you for being this week's guest expert and mentor.
Well, thank you for inviting me back. I'm thrilled to have received your invitation, Susan. It's a pleasure.
Well, you've got so much great information. How could I not say, Debra, come back? We want you. We want your information because it's so brilliant.
Thank you.
Debra, as marketers, both you and I know that in turbulent times, something that companies do, perhaps not with the best thinking in mind, is that they cut marketing budgets as a way to save money. Talk to us about why this isn't necessarily the most sensible thing for them to do.
Well, let's go back to 2001 after 9/11. I had quite a few clients calling me saying, I'm scared, I'm frightened, I don't want to spend money, I don't know what's going to happen. And then you fast forward to today when we're experiencing this virus, and not only were people asked to think about what they're doing with their business, they were asked to close their business. And so the reason that it's important to keep marketing is because you want to stay visible. You want to maintain a presence so that you keep that top of mind awareness, because when things are tough and you stay out there and people see you, and I'm not talking about going out and pitching hardcore, I'm just saying stay visible. When things are good again, or when things start to come back again, people will remember you because you stayed top of mind. So what I like to tell people is that you can share value. You can share pointers, you can share tips, and that you can stay in front of your audience without spending a lot of money. Because when times are tough, people will remember you when times are good again.
And that's so important. And I so remember that 2001 when that happened. Was it 2001? Yeah.
Yes, 9/11. Yes, I know you. It's hard to believe it was that long ago.
I know. It was like, oh my goodness, I just had this brain. It was like, what happened? Any event, yeah, in 2001, I remember so clearly. And at that point, I was in the trade show industry. And I remember going to a show in New Orleans, and it was like a ghost town. Nobody was there. And these poor exhibitors were just standing there waiting for people to walk through the doors. And yeah, you're right. People were scared and they just didn't know what to do. And in fact, I remember that my book, Meeting and Event Planning for Dummies, was ready to be published. And Wiley turned to me and they said, there are not going to be any more meetings and events. Therefore, your book isn't necessary. And of course, I mean, I laughed, but I had to prove to them. And it took me 6 months to build a case. And that book came out, I think it was the end of 2002.
Mm-hmm.
And to this day, I'm still getting royalties on it. So that's so much for meeting and events that are no longer going to take place. But let's get back to you and talking about staying top of mind. And let's delve deeper into that subject. I know that you said some tips and sharing and being of value, but let's look at some specifics, Debra, as to what can our authors do to stay top of mind with their readers, their prospects, their clients.
I always like to say, and I think you've heard me say this before, that marketing is about building and nurturing relationships. Right now, at this point in time, I'm encouraging people to be what I call a compassionate marketer. And the way that you can do that is to serve your audience. If you're an author, consider what do you have to share that's of value to your audience. And one thing you can do is what we're doing here today. They can look into being a guest on a podcast. They can host their own podcast. They can be a guest on a webinar or host their own webinar. Now, the thing that I always stress is this isn't about them getting on a podcast or a webinar and pitching their book, but it could be about them sharing tips from their book or sharing, if it's a fiction book, sharing stories about how the book came about. Think about what do you have that's of value that you can talk about as either your own host of your own show or a guest on somebody's podcast or webinar. So, for example, if you're a financial advisor, you could talk about how do you save money during a crisis. If you are a photographer, you can talk about how do you look great on camera when you haven't been in a salon for months? Or how do you look great on Zoom when you're not feeling like you're camera ready? Think about things that help you share your expertise so that you build authority and credibility. And for those people who are listening that are going, well, where do I go? How do I find an opportunity to be on a webinar or to be on a podcast? I always like to suggest radioguestlist.com, which is a website that if you subscribe, there's a free version and a paid version, but it's a free resource that will help you gain exposure to those people who are hosting programs that you might be a possible good fit for.
And that's such a wonderful idea because you're right. And you and I were talking before the show about podcasts that one person, once they see you on a show or hear you on a show, that they want you on their show, and the same people like get regenerated onto different people's shows, which is wonderful because if you have a good guest, like you, for instance, you've been on umpteen shows, and I know that you were my guest on this show probably a few years ago, but I loved you so much. I wanted you to come back, and you've done some other things for me, and I know your material is valuable. I know that other people feel the same way and have you on their shows. The same can be for all the authors who are listening to this. They too, as you say, if the value that they bring and their expertise, that they can market that in as many different directions as they can. What else should we be thinking about, Debra?
One thing that I like to recommend, if you've been a guest on a webinar or a podcast, is to take that information and repurpose it into an article. If you haven't been a guest, well, then just write an article. And when I say write an article, that could be something you put on your blog if you maintain a blog. If you don't maintain a blog, but you're on LinkedIn, you can post it as an article on LinkedIn. And then you can also look at, is there a publication that might be interested in my article? For example, when I first wrote an article about marketing in turbulent times, after I posted it on my blog first, and then I posted it on LinkedIn as an article, I reached out to a local business publication. And I said, when you do this, for those of you who are listening, when you do this, whether it's a podcast or an article, and you want to get somebody to carry you or invite you as a guest, the important thing to remember is, what is it that you bring to them, to their audience? For instance, it's not all about you and your 30 years of experience, but it's about how you're serving their audience. So when I approached that business publication, it was about, here's what I think will be of value to your readers when they read this article. If they are frustrated or fearful right now, here are cost-effective ways for them to stay visible. So that business publication did run the article. And then I reached out to a client of mine. I had spoken at their conference last year. And same article, but what I did with them is I said, I will tailor this article to your audience. Once they agreed, then I went and I did some more research, and I gave examples in their industry, and they too ran it on they had a monthly publication. So look at what you have to share, and can you either repurpose it from a podcast or a webinar, or just write something from scratch, especially if you're an author. It could be an excerpt from your book. Well, this helps you, I think you were going to maybe say this, convey your knowledge about a subject. It enhances your reputation in your industry. And again, it gets your name out to a broader audience.
Without any shadow of a doubt, the whole idea of repurposing, that you take one piece of material and you cut and dice and slice it in all different ways for different audiences. I just love that. And I've done that with so much of my material, and I know you've done it with yours. Yes, it can go in many different directions. You don't have to create something new for everyone. And I love the idea that you went to a previous client and asked to tailor that article to their customers, their prospects, because then there's that feeling, oh my goodness, she did it for us.
Yes.
It makes a
they
difference.
Appreciate that. It not only helps me, but it helps them. This was a trade association, so it lets them show their members that they're providing value and helping their members out during a turbulent time. There's a quote that a PR professional, her name is Wendy Marks, and when the virus hit, she said something about, people are panicking right now. And so it's not a time to focus on your own needs, but it's a time for you to look for ways to put your audience as a top priority and address their needs and their concerns. It wasn't up to me to contact my client and say, look at me, look at how great I am. It was up to me to say, look at how I can serve your audience and how this shows them in a good light because they're serving their audience.
And that was the exact reason when I put together the Ask the Expert that I have on a Friday afternoon. And you've been one of my experts on that. And I just wanted to reach out to my authors and my clients and say, hey, how can I support you in this time? What can I give you that will be of value? And I don't charge for that. And that's just something now that over the last 5 months has grown, and people are excited now about what's coming next week. And I never know because I'm just like flying by the seat of my pants with this because I didn't plan it out. And it was just something that I thought, hey, yeah, let's do it. And I never even thought of having other people. I thought, well, they'll do Q&A with me and with each other. And now I'm bringing on some high-level experts like yourself, and it's getting more and more exciting each week. So you just never know.
No, you don't know how things are going to blossom. But that's one way. Your Ask the Expert program, is one way that you are staying visible. It's the one way that you're keeping your top-of-mind awareness. You're not selling anything. You're just providing value. And like you said, it's growing without even trying, probably. It's because the word gets out, and then more people want to come, and then they see who the next speaker is going to be or what the next topic is going to be. And the next thing you know, it's growing into something that you had no idea would happen when you first started.
I know. It's amazing. And I've got people from Germany, from Poland, from the UK who've been attending, and of course, all around the US. But I always get a charge when somebody from overseas joins us because I think, oh, wow,
yeah, it
I'm
feels
reaching
really
a whole
good.
different... Yes. Yeah.
Yes, you're international.
I know. So it comes with the accent,
Well, yes.
Debra, something that I know that you're really good at, and I'd love you to talk more about, and that is social media. You just know how to work social media. Talk to us more about that, what you do, and what our authors could potentially do.
Social media is one of those things that is obviously very cost effective because it doesn't cost you anything, unless, of course, you want to go start doing Facebook ads and things like that. But the beauty of social media is, one of the top reasons that people do social media, and this comes from an annual social media marketing industry report, is they want to generate more exposure for their business. 86% of the people that take that survey say, and that's been probably the number one reason for the last, I want to say 3, maybe even more years than that. So social media gives you the opportunity. We've been talking about repurposing. What can you share on social media? Well, if you've been a guest on that webinar or you've been a guest on a podcast, you can share links to that so that people can hear you. If you have written an article, you take tips from that article, turn that tip into a meme and share that, or go on to LinkedIn and share it in a longer form, maybe not necessarily as an article, but just as a briefer post. Then obviously you have quotes from your book. Right now, if you were to go, for example, to Instagram for the last, I'm on tip number 6, I think. In my book, I share what I call 8 secrets to success. On Instagram, I've been creating a meme for the last 6 weeks. Each one has one tip from the book. And when I post it, I give the quote with the tip. I say what page it's on in my book. And then, of course, I say there's a link in the bio if you want to find out more about the book. Then on social media, you can do video clips. Same thing. Do a video with just one short tip from your book, or do a Facebook Live video. For people who say, I don't have fancy equipment, you can just say, well, pick up your phone and do a Facebook Live or do an Instagram Live. That's some of the tips for social media, but you can go further than that. You can do, other people's quotes, do uplifting and inspirational memes. You can share testimonials. Every so often, I'll take a testimonial from somebody who has either heard me speak or somebody who's read my book, and maybe it's an Amazon review, and I'll post that on social media. And just yesterday, one of the things I've been doing during this stay-at-home time is I started creating art using something called alcohol inks. And I turned them into note cards. And a local store here put them in their store, on their store racks. I posted it on Facebook, and I think I haven't checked this morning, but there were like 200 people who have liked it or loved it or commented on it about how awesome it is. Now, people are saying, where can I get those cards if they're not local? So I'm like, oh, well, here's a link to the website where you can order the card. So social media can be very powerful. The important thing, and one of the beautiful things I love about it, it's unfortunate that we're in this COVID period right now, because the beauty of social media is when you build and nurture relationships there, and then you get to meet that person in person. Because my colleague, we were just talking about him before we got online, Brian Fanzo says, when you do social media right, the chances are pretty high that when you get to meet that person for the first time, you won't just shake their hand, you'll hug them. And right now, that's one of the things I miss most are hugs. But just keep in mind that it's about nurturing relationships. It's not about getting on social media and pitching your stuff. Not always. For example, I don't get on social media every day and say, buy my book, buy my book. Why didn't you buy my book? You should buy my book. But I do get on and say, here's a quote from my book, or here's a tip from my book. And then I put a link in there, but I'm not shouting and screaming, buy my book. I'm offering value first. I think that's very important for people. For example, I've spoken a lot about LinkedIn. And people will send out a request to connect on LinkedIn. And then the next thing you know, sometimes even in their request, they're already pitching before they've ever gotten to know you, like you, or trust you, and vice versa. But other times they'll connect and they might say, oh, I heard you speak on Susan's podcast. And so you accept them because you go, oh, they heard me on Susan's podcast. But then the next thing you know, they're pitching. Oh, let me show you how you can 10 times your book sales. But I don't even know you yet, or like you yet, or trust you yet. Be careful when it comes to social media that you're using it in a way that encourages engagement. It gets you involved with other people in, again, I'll go back to that phrase, compassionate way, as opposed to a pitchy, salesy way. My understanding, or actually more my philosophy is, when people know you, like you, and trust you, then they'll refer you or they'll pay you for whatever it is you're selling. But you have to build that relationship first.
How do you respond to someone who, like you said, they introduce themselves, that they heard you on my show, for instance, and then they start pitching you? Do you respond to them? Do you ignore them? Do you block them? What do you do with them?
Well, so for example, I think of LinkedIn first. Luckily, it's not often that I get those kind of requests, but it has happened. So for example, the other day, somebody sent me something requesting to connect on LinkedIn, and then they were pitching. But sadly, what they were pitching to me was something that really had nothing to do with what I do. And if they had actually read my profile, they would have known that. Sometimes I'll be polite and just say, I'm just curious why you sent me this request when I don't really have anything to do with that industry. Other times, I don't think I ever ignore them. There might be one or two times where I might. I don't block them. I do have colleagues that will find something snarky to say and respond with something snarky. Like, gee, instead of responding to, let's say they want to sell you, let me increase your book sales 10 times. They might respond with, oh, Susan, let me teach you a lesson or two about LinkedIn and LinkedIn etiquette and how you can build relationships before you start pitching somebody. I haven't done that in my responses, but I do have colleagues that have. It depends. Use that answer. It depends on what they're saying and how they're saying it, and whether you want to be kind and polite, or you want to ignore them, or you want to be snarky.
I love it. It depends. Yes. It's so funny because I've had several guests when I ask them a question, and it's never a yes or a no. It's always, it depends. Yes. There's always that sort of gray in between the black and the white. So absolutely. No, you're absolutely right there. And which platform have you found for your work, it works particularly well?
Well, when it came, for example, to my book, I would say that probably Facebook was first. Because as you know, I started to market my book, and I'm fairly certain you suggest this to your authors, that they start marketing before the book is ever done. And using Facebook, for example, when I was coming up with a cover or trying to come up with a cover and sharing that with and this is on my personal wall. I think I did it on my business page as well, but more responses came on my personal wall about which cover they liked better. When I go to LinkedIn, I always try to make sure I tie it into business. For example, regarding the art and the greeting cards that I got into a retail store the other day. I posted that on LinkedIn, and I shared that this was one of the silver linings of COVID was my art. And I ask the question, what's the silver lining in your business? Always look at the platform you're on and what is your goal, and then craft your post or your article or whatever it is to that audience so that it makes sense for the person that's viewing it.
That's so wise. How about mistakes? You know that our authors and listeners love to learn about common mistakes. What are ones that come to mind for you?
Oh, you mean in marketing in general, or there's
Well,
so
maybe
many?
even let's specify during this time, during these turbulent times.
Oh, during this time, oh, well, you get me started. In the very beginning, when the virus hit, and I'm guessing many people who are listening had this experience because I've heard it more than once when I've been a guest on someone's show. You probably got one of those emails that said, "Oh, hi, Susan. How are you doing during this turbulent time? You know, my heart goes out to you. I'm sure it's been a challenge. And by the way, buy my stuff. Here's what I'm selling today. So I think you should take a look at what I've gotten because I'm offering it at a special discount today." And I'm like, whoa, wait, what happened there? You started reaching out to me, sounding as if you were compassionate and concerned about my well-being and my welfare, and then you went into a pitch. I had somebody message me on Facebook, a private message. They started with, "Hi, Debra. I really like those cards you're creating. How are you?" And this is a person I know, but I hadn't heard from in a while. And so I explained to her about my art and how this was one of the silver linings of this virus. And it was like she never even read it. She just went into a pitch and said, "I've been working with so-and-so, and he's making 30 million bucks. And his partner, Mary so-and-so, has been making 10 million bucks. And so are you interested in a new business opportunity?" And I said, "Thank you, but no." You started out this conversation acting as if you were interested in what I was doing, but in reality, it was just an opening line to then go into her pitch. The mistake I think people make is, is they start pitching before they share any value, I guess is the best way to put it, before they actually nurture the relationship and find out, is what you're offering something that would be of value to me? Before you actually just assume that you can pitch it to me before you know enough about me.
Yeah, that whole bait and switch. It's
Yeah, how are you? Buy my stuff.
Yeah.
I don't really care how you are. I just ask that to be polite. No, if you're going to ask, then use it to have a conversation, and to nurture that conversation. And then here's the thing, Susan, the mistake I think some people make is they want a quick fix. They want the easy button. And just like in life, and relationships in general, it takes time to build those. It's not like you are a guest on a podcast and, tomorrow you make 10 million bucks, or that you write that article and the next thing you know, people want to buy everything you have to offer, or you post on social media. And then the next thing you open up your email and 10 zillion offers, purchases have come in. It takes time to do that. It takes time for those things to happen. It doesn't mean there probably are those success stories of people that say, "Oh my God, I posted something and then the next day I woke up and there were all these orders in my inbox." I think it happens to some people. But those people who are really looking for the, how do I make money fast solutions? How do I sell 1 million books tomorrow? I think you'd back me up in saying, you don't sell 1 million books overnight.
It's very hard to sell 1 million books, period. So yes, I know very few people who've done that. I've managed close to 500,000, but haven't quite hit the million yet.
The million mark. Yeah, yes. Well, I'm not anywhere near it. So.
I know it's a tough road, and that's why I say people shouldn't rely on getting rich out of the book, but they could get rich from many other ways.
Many of which
we've been talking about. Debra, if listeners wanted to find more about your services, how could they do that?
They can find me on most social media platforms, but my website as a copywriter is rightdirection.com, and that's spelled WRITE, rightdirection.com. If they're interested in my book, that's Millionaire Marketing on a Shoestring Budget. And if they're interested in finding a dynamic speaker to be a guest on their show, that's DebraJason.com. DEBRA, Debra Jason.
And that'll all go into the show notes, and there'll be a link to buy your book as well, because I love that book. I mean, I just see the cover with that gold shoestring, and listeners, look for it when you see the show notes. It's a fabulous cover. It's very striking. Yes. Debra, if you could leave our listeners with a golden nugget, you've given us so much great information, but I just always like to squeeze a little harder. What else can you give us?
What else can I give? I would say the most important thing, and I know this has been said before, but I think it's just so true, is to be authentic and to be true to yourself and look at, if you're an author, what comes from your heart? There's a reason you wrote that book, whether it's a fiction book or a nonfiction book, and share that with the world, because then people will see who you are from an honest and sincere perspective and will resonate with that. And that's where I think you'll start to build and nurture relationships, because people will want to be in touch with you. People will want to have a relationship with you. So just be authentic, be true to yourself, and be kind to yourself.
Not only are you a marketing mentor, but you're a compassionate marketing mentor. So thank you. You've been wonderful again. I love having you on the show. You share such great information, and this is very appropriate, obviously, for what's going on in our lives at the moment. Thank you so much. And thank you all for taking time out of your precious day to listen to this interview. And I sincerely hope that it sparked some ideas you can use to sell more books. Here's wishing you much book marketing success.
The time is now to take action and finally build your book-selling empire. And the great news is that Susan is here to help you. Visit bookmarketingmentors.com and sign up for a free 15-minute book marketing strategy session with Susan. She'll help you discover your first steps to marketing and selling your book. Only those who take action are rewarded, so visit bookmarketingmentors.com, and we'll see you again next week.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.